Please be seated, everyone.
Chief Justice Rabner, former Chief Justices Alley, Associate Justices of the Supreme Court, Governor Byrne, Director Grant, and members of the Stern family, I want to welcome all of you today for the presentation of the portrait of our former Presiding Judge for Administration, Edwin H. Stern. I'm so pleased that so many current and former members of our Supreme Court are with us today, an acknowledgement of Judge Stern's contributions to the judiciary and to the state of New Jersey through his long and distinguished career. And we are honored that Governor Byrne has been able to join us today. The Appellate Division is a uniquely collegial court, and so many members, past and present, have turned out to honor Judge Stern. And it's impossible to acknowledge or introduce all of them. I do want to, however, acknowledge the presence of Judge Ariel Rodriguez, who has served as the acting presiding judge for administration for this past year. And I also want to acknowledge our clerk, Joe Orlando, who with his entire staff has worked so hard to make today's event possible. The walls of our Appellate Division courtroom display our history in the portraits of our past presiding judges for administration. And the portrait of Judge Stern will join those of his predecessors. Judge Sidney Goldman, Judge Milton Conford, Judge Robert Matthews, Judge Herman Michaels, and Judge Sylvia Pressler. At the time that the portrait of Judge Michaels was presented, Judge Pressler spoke, and she said at that occasion that these individuals had set the standards that continue to inspire and guide the court, and they personified the striving for excellence that has characterized this court from its inception. And Judge Stern, through his service on this court, indeed throughout his entire career, more than met that measure. Fernando Pinguelo is a former clerk of Judge Stern's. He clerked for Judge Stern for the year 1997-1998. I received an email that Mr. Pinguelo received a grade from Judge Stern, but I will not share that with you. Judge Stern is free to do that. But we will now hear from Mr. Pinguelo. Pinguelo?
Thank you. I thought long and hard about how best to reflect on Judge Stern's lifetime of accomplishments from his law clerk's perspective. Problem is, how do you condense 30 years or 262,800 hours into a 3-minute speech? Well, luckily, for me at least, there's an app for that. Twitter, the online social networking phenomenon that enables users to send and receive messages of up to 140 characters, known as tweets, or as I'd like to refer to it, as the 21st century's answer to curbing pontification and verboseness. So what I have planned isn't quite a speech, nor would it qualify entirely as a 140-character tweet. Rather, I've prepared a tweech. Yes, a tweech. So I present here today a compilation of 140-character sound bites submitted by some of Judge Stern's former law clerks who condensed their clerk year into a tweet. And while I'm at it, I'd like to take a moment to personally lobby the Chief Justice to consider a rule amendment to 2:6-7 of the Rules Governing Appellate Practice, which currently puts the maximum page number for initial briefs at 65, or more aptly, 109,850 characters. I believe an amendment to Rule 2:6-7, modeled after the 140-character tweet, would work just fine, and suspect your colleagues would appreciate that. That said, on to the tweets. Sam Flack's 2009 to 2010, the most profound impact that I witnessed Judge Stern have was when he allowed a pro se plaintiff suing the judiciary for discrimination to argue for an hour. The plaintiff closed by saying it was a relief to finally be heard. Judge Stern always listens. Andy Barrett, 1984 to 1985. Warmest regards to a mentor, friend, and good guy. You hold the record for 30 written decisions in 1 year as a trial judge. Chris Bork, 1989 to 1990. My most memorable Judge Stern moment was being sworn into the profession I'd always aspired to by my most admired legal scholar. Thank you, Judge. Armando Gonzalez, 1995 to 1996. The most powerful lesson I learned was to always take time for your family no matter how busy you are at work. It didn't matter what he was doing. He always took his family members' calls and did what he could for them despite his busy work schedule. Nitin Sharma. Most memorable Judge Stern moment was when I arrived to his office to find that he had spent most, if not all, of the night working tirelessly on a Supreme Court opinion near the end of the term. His unparalleled work ethic was a great model for me as I began my legal career. Jessica Cornett, 2008 to 2009. Most memorable Judge Stern moment was when he provided champagne and cake to celebrate my engagement, because when you clerk for Judge Stern, you become a part of his family. Audrey Stern, 1985 to 86. Here's my profound lesson, that you can't be a true legal scholar without having a big heart and lots of compassion, just like Judge Stern. Erin Carroll, 2010 to 2011. My most memorable Judge Stern moment was the first time he effortlessly quoted the proposition of law that I needed, the name of the decision, the volume containing it, and the judge who authored it. Judge Stern never forgets a case. Dana Caparuso. My most profound impact that I witnessed Judge Stern have on someone during my clerkship was when he was on emergent application duty and he allowed a mother and her 5 children into his office to consider her application for emergent relief to prevent her from being evicted from her apartment. While he denied her application, he was so kind and careful to explain why the application was being denied so that the mother, who was pro se, understood and accepted his decision. That was actually 2 tweets. Christine Crutchlow, 1994 to 1995. The pivotal lesson I learned as a clerk with Judge Stern was to believe in my legal abilities, which enabled me to join a law practice with the necessary confidence to succeed. Thank you, Judge. Jen Budd, 2010 to 2011. It always amazed me that Judge appeared to know the life story of every judge on the AppDiv and most law division judges in North Jersey. It showed me the positive impact that truly caring for your colleagues can have on a work environment. Jessica Tracy, 1999 to 2000. The most powerful lesson I learned from Judge Stern during my clerkship was that it's important to do the right thing even when it's hard. He leaves a little piece of his heart in every decision he makes. Vina Shilashan, 2010 to 2011. The most powerful lesson I learned from Judge Clerk during my clerkship was the adage is true: kindness reflects great strength. Ann Schooley, 1998 to 99. The most powerful lesson I learned was the importance of reading everything. Judge Stern took the time to read all the briefs in the trial court record because he understood how much the case mattered to the litigants, and therefore it mattered to him. Amy Bales, 2002 to 2003. What I learned from Judge Stern is that in the law and life, you practice with heart while using your logic. On a more practical level, while researching a very obscure law, he said, the last 200 years of this country had to have happened once before. In my personal tweet, Fernando Penguilla, 1997, the most powerful lesson I learned from Judge Stern during my clerkship was to never underestimate the pressures and responsibilities that come with practicing law, which I recall at the time, but which I never appreciated until many years later, after I began my practice and had my own clients, CEG, Starton v. Weinstein, 305, NJ Super, 236, AppDiv, 1997, Certif denied, 153, NJ, 214, 1998. These tweets truly capture how influential Judge Stern was and continues to be in our lives. Before I close, I'd like to share with you a few statistics which are a direct result of our connection to you since 1981. 48 law clerks spanning 30 years. 7 law clerks now work at large law firms. 80 law clerks now work at small, medium law firms. 8 law clerks have started their own firms. 5 law clerks now work at companies as in-house counsel. 5 law clerks are at home with the kids. 2 law clerks now work at pro bono legal services. 10 law clerks now work in the public sector. 2 law clerks now work in academia. And 1 law clerk is an elected official. We practice in 15 of the 21 New Jersey counties, in 6 states and 3 countries. Judge, we appreciate the long hours we spent working with you. We enjoyed your openness in sharing your family with us. And most of all, thank you for not only helping to make us better professionals, but also, more importantly, better individuals. Now, as I present the portrait, I'd like to acknowledge the artist behind the masterpiece, Liza Gladstein Amir, to my right. Liza's superb work will hang here on these walls. And no disrespect to the other artists whose works are on display, but in my humble opinion, Liza's work sets a new bar for artists commissioned to paint portraits to be hung in the Appellate Division Courtroom Gallery. With that, I turn to the Honorable Dorothea Weffing, Presiding Judge for Administration of the Superior Court of New Jersey Appellate Division, the Law Clerk Commissioned Portrait of the Honorable Edwin H. Stern, Presiding Judge for Administration of the Superior Court of New Jersey Appellate Division, retired. Judge Weffing, on behalf of all of Judge Stern's law clerks who have served in that capacity during his tenure on the bench, we look forward to seeing his portrait hang alongside the many generations of esteemed jurists. And in line with my tweet, I'd like to say to Judge Stern, BBFN, BTW, we hope you enjoy your time with your family. JSYK, your impact will always be remembered. We will miss the F2F, but look forward to more of the VTV. And all hope to TTYS. Thank you for all of those who you've inspired.
Mr. Pinguello, thank you so much for those very kind remarks. You have summed up so many of Judge Stern's qualities, the observations of your clerks. I do hope that we will now have the opportunity to see Judge Stern's portrait if you and Ms. Amir would like to unveil it for us. Mr. Pinguello, I can assure you, on behalf of the present appellate division and all future appellate divisions, that we will treasure this portrait and treat it with the respect and honor that it deserves. Thank you so much. I would now ask Chief Justice Rabner, who honors us with his presence today, for a few remarks.
Thank you, Judge Weffing. It is so good to see so many colleagues and special guests in the courtroom for today's special ceremony. Fernando, as with any proposed change to the appellate rules, I would turn to wise counsel, Ed Stern, seek his advice. Let me tell you, I don't think it bodes well for you. I can't recall him expressing himself in 140 characters in any interactions that I've had with him. And now that he's in private practice, getting paid for reviewing briefs, offering counsel, I don't think you're going to fare that well, but we'll take it under advisement, as they say. I do have a few words that I'd like to say about the honoree, but first, I want to congratulate the artist, Liza Gladstein Amir. This is truly magnificent. I understand that for this accomplished artist, this is her first portrait, and it is an incredible statement of what the future holds for you and your work. You've captured Judge Stern so beautifully. We're pleased to have you here today. Now, as for the honoree, anyone who comes into contact with Judge Stern knows and walks away with a sense that they have spent time with a true master. And that's true whether the interaction takes place in an appellate panel conference room, at a lecture hall, in a meeting of one of our committees, or over lunch. After just a few moments with this gentle, modest person, it's easy to see why he's revered as one of the true giants of the New Jersey judiciary. You get quickly, if you're wise enough to listen, a sense of his depth of experience, of his knowledge on so many issues in different areas of law. Add to that his generous, earnest spirit, and you have a person who is always willing to lend a hand to everyone else. Many of you sat with Ed on appellate division panels over the years, and you know firsthand of his many gifts, the clarity of his thinking and his writing, his willingness to probe, his ability to get the big picture and see the nuanced questions underneath, a willingness to reconsider and to redraft opinions as he attempts to express the reasoning as clearly and as ably as one possibly could, his enormous capacity for hard work, and his steadfast dedication to excellence and to the cause of justice. When he sat temporarily on the Supreme Court for the last year of his service on the bench, the justices saw all of those qualities and then some. At least once during any conference, and Fernando, one of your co-clerks, alluded to this, when a nuanced, difficult question of law would come up, usually a presentation by someone else, Judge Stern, in his inimitable, calm fashion, would stand up and say, I think that Justice so-and-so wrote about this 26 years ago in the XYZ case. Then he'd walk over to the bookshelves, grab just the right volume off of the shelf, and open and recite from the case, which of course stood for the very principle that he remembered that it did. If the discussion turned on a criminal statute, Ed would no doubt often recite its history from memory, perhaps because he had a hand in drafting it and certainly knew all the amendments to it by heart. No one has a more in-depth knowledge of the court rules, which, over the years, he had a hand in helping create and shape by leading one or another of many different Supreme Court committees. Today, we see Judge Stern's influence on the practice of law in so many different areas. What's equally impressive is how long he has had a guiding hand in the practice of law for our legal community. When I was preparing to offer some remarks at his retirement ceremony a year ago, I came across an agenda for a judicial college meeting that took place nearly 40 years ago in September of 1974, and I want to share the story again because these proceedings are going to be made a permanent record of the Supreme Court reports, Superior Court reports. There were hundreds of sitting judges in the conference in Atlantic City. The meeting had an agenda similar to what our judicial colleges these days have. Began with Chief Justice Hughes opening the program, then the director of the AOC leading a discussion on the courts, followed by a program for all judges titled Developments in Criminal Law. Who taught those judges? 2 sitting judges and a young man by the name of Edwin H. Stern. You could ask the same question, who taught the judges in the past decade or the past generation, and come up with the very same answer, the Honorable Edwin H. Stern. And we've all learned a great deal from him, from his fund of knowledge, his humility, his humanity. And that's why it is so fitting that we'll remember his many contributions to the legal career with this portrait that will hang in a courtroom where lawyers walk in their search for justice. Ed, we're so pleased to be able to celebrate today with you, with your family. On behalf of the Supreme Court, congratulations.
Thank you, Chief Justice Rabner. Chief Justice Alley?
Thank you. Chief Justice Rabner, Chief Justice Ports, Governor Byrne, the wife of John Weffing, and justices and judges and all of the friends and colleagues and family that are here. Let me start by acknowledging and asking that person to be recognized, to acknowledge the person that is most responsible for Eddie Stern's successful life and career. Beverly, would you please stand up and be acknowledged? Now, I was deliberating what to do today, and Ed told me to kibitz as much as I wanted to, but that's not my style, and I wanted to approach this seriously, so I did, and I asked him to please give me a 1-2 page summary of his major accomplishments so I can make reference to them. And last Saturday, Federal Express, I received this from Ed Stern. Okay? So that's a start, and maybe a finish. But I think, did you take memo writing from Dennis Bliss? That's a name that a few of you remember. I shouldn't talk like that because I can recall having clerked for Judge Whipple, who, this is many years ago, the year after that clerkship, he saw a lawyer on the street and said to that lawyer, you know, Jimmy's okay, but for heaven's sake, if you see him coming to work, don't ever say good morning to him, because if you do, he'll probably give you a memo. So I somewhat identify with you, Eddie, and I understand your penchant. There was a great retirement dinner last year for Eddie, you may recall. Very warm-hearted speech. The only problem is that after an hour and 10 minutes, Eddie was in the 2nd grade. Now, he reassured me that that would not happen today, but just in case, I reserved a room at the Marriott. I've become, you know, I knew him well in the AOC, in criminal justice, then for his years on the bench, now as a partner in the great Gibbons firm, but I have to tell you, I did not know what a philosopher he was, and he really loves the philosophical end of things. Just the other day, he was chatting about the philosophers Socrates and Plato in the office, and so I said to him, because we're all groping with our existential challenges, and I said to him, Eddie, what is the meaning of life? You know, you've been around a long time, and he's very reflective. What is the meaning of life? So he paused, he pondered, he stroked his beard, and after about 7 minutes said, life is like a semicolon. That didn't work. But you know, if you think about his writing skills, maybe. Well, let's go on to something more concrete. This is a magnificent portrait. Brad Pitt, your history. But it's really amazing. I'm startled as to the extent to which the artist was able to get Eddie to sit for so long. That's remarkable. I understand that since then you did go into therapy for a while, understandably. I had something to do with Eddie's career, a little bit, not much. It was back around the 80s when Chief Justice Williams called me. I was in private practice, and he asked me what I thought of putting Ed Stern on the appellate division. So I told him what I thought of Eddie Stern, and Eddie was appointed 6 years later. At that retirement dinner, you may recall Barry Evanchik's terrific anecdotes about Eddie's career, especially about his penchant for worrying. And I did a little research into that, determined that there are a couple of new anecdotes that are maybe worth telling. When you were with the AOC 30 years ago, apparently working 18 hours a day as usual, and you used to take the yellow pads out of the office because you would often work at home, doing your outlines on the pads, scribbling notes, writing opinions, or whatever. And one day you came up with Dave Boehm, and we're driving away from the office, from Trenton, and Eddie happened to mention to you that the Attorney General at the time was conducting an investigation of missing supplies. And with that, according to history, you turned around, drove back to Trenton, and put the pads back in the supply room. Now, I don't know whether that's true. The point is, it could have been true.
Unfortunately, it's true. But it was the Attorney General's office.
Okay.
And he was the chief law enforcement officer.
Okay, now there's another version of that. There was a version of that where you apparently had a gas card legitimately, and you came up, it was a blizzardy night, and you were driving home, freezing, you pulled into a gas station. The crotchety attendant came out not wanting to see anybody that night, came out of his shack. You gave him the card, the gas tank was filled, he messed up on the card. It turned out that you thought he threw the slip away, but he gave you a new slip, you signed the new slip, you drove away, and you said, oh my God, I think the state will be billed twice. And you drove around, you drove back to the gas station, you got the poor guy out of the shack a second time in the blizzard, and you rummaged through the trash basket to find it. Well, I did an independent inquiry of my own over the weekend, and I went to that gas station and I found the slip. Okay, okay. You owe this. You're billed twice. You owe $26.20. Okay, so take care of it. Otherwise, we're going to report you to Chiesa. Yeah. But there we are. Trying to compress this and moving through it. I'm reminded. Just one other thought. I've known Eddie all these years, now we're together. The managing partner of our firm, Pat Dunnican, set us up just within feet of each other. So my office is actually just about where Joe is. And I look diagonally across and see Ed there. And, you know, Fernando, like you did tweets, I wrote one for myself, please shut the door, okay? So, because I gotta tell you, Pat Dunnican, this is rough. I look at him, he's there, and he's developed, and I can say this, an Italian intercom system. Whenever he wants me, it's, hey, chief, you know? But it's not troubling. You know, you all had the privilege of working with Eddie for so long. Every day you saw him. I see him every minute. And truth be told, I'm now starting to miss Roberto. On a far more serious and far more important note, and now I'll try to compress this into about 2 minutes. Now is not the time, given the constraints of time and everything else, that you don't get into Eddie's substantial legal accomplishments. Few of us have accomplished as much. A master, yes, of so many disciplines. No one in the state has a better grasp, for example, of the criminal law and procedure. But that's only a small piece of it. In that process of making decisions and rendering opinions, he always demonstrated first the intelligence to figure out what the right thing was to do, and then he had the integrity to see it through, and ultimately, in as many cases as he could, added a little bit of an ingredient called compassion to what he did. The real story about Eddie is not that substantive stuff. It's about how he's been so generous of his time, his ability, his expertise, and himself, whether with strangers, whether young lawyers, whether old lawyers, whomever. He was privileged, as I say, to know him for every bit of 20, well, it's now 33 years. I know anyone who's more unselfish, I know of no more decent human being. There are those little grace notes of his going into the appellate division clerk's office whenever he was down to go around and to greet everyone, not because he was politicking, there was no reason to do that, but simply because he cared. And he had great joy in doing what he was doing, saying hello, I repeat to everyone and everyone. Great joy and also with great sincerity. We've talked about Ed's worrying, but over the years, there's one thing that he worried about as much as anything else, and that was the welfare and the well-being of our judicial system. His dedication to the improvement of our courts and to the improvement of the rules under which they operate has been nothing less than astounding. And so, as I close this out, I'm sort of trying to reconnect Ed in some ephemeral way, though he is retired, to our judicial system. How do I do it? You are, no secret, facing challenging times, but you are and you will continue to be equal to the task. What I'm doing here is just suggesting that, as a reminder from time to time, think of Ed's commitment to both justice and to our judiciary as an example to all of us and following that example. With public servants like Ed and like you will endure. By this portrait today and by your presence, you honor Ed Stern. But the best way to honor him, I think, is to follow his example, his dedication to our fellow man and to the system. Again, it won't be easy, and it's not easy now. There's an old Italian expression which the Polish Pope John Paul used, which I think is apropos. He said, "Coraggio ma soprattutto pazienza." Coraggio, courage, ma soprattutto, but above all, pazienza. Courage, but above all, patience. So take time, it will all work out. With the leadership of Chief Justice Rabner, with a great court, irrespective of political party affiliation, just following their lead, following the example of an Ed Stern, you will not simply maintain the reputation of one of the great judiciaries in the country, you will enhance it. And so coming back to Eddie Stern, the Honorable Edwin H. Stern, all of us, Eddie, are so blessed to have known you. So lucky. You have our enduring respect, you have our affection, and most of all, you have our love. Thank you.
Mr. Pinguela and Chief Justice Rabner and Chief Justice Zali have all spoken eloquently of Judge Stern, and they have captured so many of his unique attributes. And there's very little left that I can say, but I do want to say a few words on behalf of the Appellate Division and on behalf of myself. I said earlier that the Appellate Division is a collegial court, and it is. But I don't think one could find anyone more collegial than Judge Stern. We have heard of his kindness and his compassion. It is simply unmatched. Judge Stern, through the years that I have known him, is simply unable to think an unkind thought about anyone. The Appellate Division is a court of tradition, and we are proud of our commitment to excellence and diligence and integrity, and nobody could exemplify those qualities more than Judge Stern. I was privileged to sit 1 year on a panel with Judge Stern as my presiding judge, and it was a memorable experience in many ways. I learned so many things from that year, and I am profoundly grateful to him. You spoke, Mr. Pinguelo, about asking Judge Stern about a principle of law, and he would give you a citation. And I know that I have had that experience so often. I know that when I went to pick up the volume, I often found who the author of the opinion was. So I'm privileged to have had Judge Stern as my professional colleague for so many years. But I am even more privileged because I consider Judge Stern to be such a good friend. To have Judge Stern as a friend is a treasure beyond measure. So on behalf of the Appellate Division, I am so pleased to accept this wonderful portrait. We are so grateful to Judge Stern's clerks for arranging this. We are so grateful to you, Ms. Amir, for producing this work. We are so grateful to you, Judge Stern, for all that you have done for us over the years. So the floor is now yours.
Thank you very much. Governor Byrne, thank you for coming. Chief Justice Poritz, Chief Justice Zali, Chief Justice Rabner, Judge Weffing, justices, judges, colleagues, friends, thank you for being here. I want to thank each of you, each and every one in this room, and some who are not here, for helping me in different ways to do my job better and to make my professional life enjoyable every day and to help me love the work I did. That's with the exception of my new friends at Gibbons, who were not part of my judicial life, and my 4 new friends from the Regency where we live, which are the 4 people who invite us out for dinner and pick up the check. I would like to develop just briefly what Judge Weffing mentioned in terms of my predecessors. Before 1969, there was no presiding judge of the appellate division, much less presiding judge for administration. The senior judges were called senior judges, and they presided over the panels. Judge Sidney Goldman on my right was the first presiding judge for administration until 1973. Judge Milton Conford, the second, until 1979, and he sat on the Supreme Court temporarily assigned through much of that period of time. One during the absence of Justice Fred Hall, and once during the period of litigation over the appointment of Stephen Wiley to the Supreme Court and the decision in Breland versus Byrne. Then came Robert Matthews until 1985, Herman Michaels until 1997, and Sylvia Pressler until 2004. Now, you may want to know why the portraits are arranged the way they are. And most of you would say it's because Judge Pressler, from the point of view of the court, wanted Herman on the right and herself on the left. But that's not really the truth. The true story is that when the then administrator, John Misevich, asked Judge Pressler why she was laying out the portraits that way, she said, "I want to stare down Ed Stern for eternity." I'm going to take a couple of moments, because this will be my last time speaking to the judiciary in public. I want to thank everyone for being such an important part of my professional and my personal life. And I want to name people. Please forgive me if I don't name everyone. Everybody was important, but there's some that I have to signal out today. First, to Judge Edward Galkin, the senior, who inspired me to come back to New Jersey and to clerk for him. And then his son, Judge Galkin the younger, who hired me when he became prosecutor in Hudson County, and not only gave me the opportunity to be his first assistant, but to become projected into state government, working on projects of importance in establishing the Criminal Justice Act in office management and systems and priorities within the criminal justice system. To Richard Hughes, who after Judge Galkin's departure and my years as acting prosecutor, brought me into state government, into the AOC as Director of Criminal Practice. Of course, to Governor Byrne, who appointed me to the bench with the strong support of Chief Justice Zali, then Attorney General, and my dear and good friend Barry Evanchik, who is here somewhere, and for whom I thank for doing so many things for me. I would be remiss, Governor, if I didn't mention the late Daniel O'Hearn, who was then your counsel. And when he or you, through him, were told by the Democrats of Essex County that they would not waste a space on someone who did not contribute, did not participate, was not a supporter of the Essex County organization, then Counsel O'Hearn turned around and said, well, Governor Byrne understands that you are not going to be confirmed as a member of the district court or the juvenile and domestic relations court, so he's going to put you on one of his unallocated 20 seats on the Superior Court. And we all taught them a lesson. Thank you very, very much. I have to thank the late Chief Justice Robert Willentz, who brought me back to the AOC from the Attorney General's office. I've said it many times. I will repeat it here today. Robert Wilentz and his administrative director, Robert Lipscher, made my 2.5 years with them the best 25 years of my professional life. And I must thank sincerely as well Chief Justice Wilentz, who assigned me to the Appellate Division, Chief Justice Poritz, who made me a presiding judge, then presiding judge for administration, and despite all that I did, Chief Justice Zali and Chief Justice Rabner that kept me there. Thank you all very much. Now, I want to talk briefly about what these lady and gentlemen mean to our court, mean to me, mean to our profession. And I'm going to talk not about Sylvia or Herman, who you know I love and who I owe so much to, but I want to talk about the first presiding judge for administration who really set the standards, as Judge Weffing said. I hope my colleagues and friends on the Appellate Division listen to this story and appreciate how the traditions of the Appellate Division were established. My story starts in the spring of 1971 on a street in Jersey City, where two men got into a fight, and one picked up a 2x4, hit the other over the head. The victim fell and apparently went into a coma. So the perpetrator was scared, and he ran to a nearby school seeking the aid of one of his teachers, Sister Margaret Murtha. The victim passed away. And no one, now that we had a homicide investigation, knew who the perpetrator was. No one but Sister Margaret Murtha. So not knowing the age of the perpetrator, we started a grand jury investigation, Prosecutor Galkin did, and we called before the grand jury Sister Margaret Murtha, who would not otherwise tell us the name of the perpetrator. And Sister Margaret came to the grand jury and asserted the priest-penitent privilege. Well, we didn't think the priest-penitent privilege applied. And in those days, there was new law out of the U.S. Supreme Court, in a case called Chilitani versus the United States, if I remember it correctly, which said that you could use civil contempt or seek an ordinate of litigants' rights to compel a witness to testify before the grand jury by coercion, by incarcerating them until they purge themselves by being willing to do so. Sister Margaret was not willing. She was asserting the priest-penitent privilege. So Judge Galkin, then Prosecutor Galkin, turned to this short little fat Jewish boy from East Orange, New Jersey, and directed him to go and seek the incarceration of a nun in Hudson County. And I went up to the Honorable Sam Larner, then assignment judge, and sought the incarceration successfully. Whereupon the Archdiocese of Newark retained counsel, and here's where the story starts for the Appellate Division. Counsel sought emergent relief. And what did he do? He sought the nearest available judge, Judge Sidney Goldman in Trenton, a distinguished judge, a ordained rabbi, a pianist, a mathematician, and the emergent application was made to Judge Goldman. And Beverly will remember that she says I put her in the back seat of our car because she was pregnant with Scott. I don't remember how that happened. Quite pregnant with Scott. And we drove to Trenton, and we argued the emergent application before Judge Goldman, and after it was granted, he played the piano for us, his wife served tea on a silver platter, just as things are done today in the appellate system. Now, it may not exactly be the way we do things, But the reality is that the standards and the class was established there. The standards of doing excellence remain, and our Chief Justice, each and every one of them, have managed to appoint the best, most hardworking people to our appellate division, and we should be proud of them. Beverly will also remember another encounter with Judge Goldman early in my career when Jeff Galkin sent me to a Saturday morning lecture by Judge Goldman to prosecutors doing appellate work to learn the important things about appellate practice. And one of the things Judge Goldman taught and stressed, and Beverly kept remarking this to me for years, was the importance of proper placement of the staple and how important it was to staple briefs properly. And we laughed about it for a couple of years until 13 years later I came onto the appellate division and stabbed myself 3 times with loose paper staples. And so now I know one of the most important things to remember as an appellate division judge. I want to mention, as I bring this somewhat to a close, a number of people who are here, my colleagues, my friends, my appellate division family, each of whom taught me something, each of whom contributed to my success, to my thinking, and to my ability to be an appellate judge, each of whom taught me something valuable, and each of whom was a very decent and wonderful human being. First, to Pat King, who I'm glad to see here today, who was the only appellate division judge, the only presiding judge, who allowed me to write a published opinion on the rule against perpetuities, and I'm deeply indebted. To my friend Bob Muir, a colleague and companion in Morristown, who got me through some very, very tough years, personally, with illness at home, and to whom I will always be indebted for his friendship and for his counsel. To Dorothea, of course, a friend. We share a lake in the summer. She and John still have not taught me how to windsurf, but it will be coming. Bob Fall, who really was responsible not only for the dinner last year, but I know he put the idea in Fernando and the other clerks' minds of this wonderful portrait, which I deeply appreciate, which overwhelms me, Liza, and I'm so glad you did it. I have to mention Jack Sabatino and Linda Baxter, the resolution last year at the Judicial College still brings tears to my eyes, and I mean it. And then my Morristown family, and they are my family. I was there for 26 years. I consider them all my deep friends, the last 11 of which Janie LaVecchia was there. And not only is she a brilliant jurist, but a dear friend. And the last appellate division judge I'm going to mention, and I hope no one is mad that I omitted them, is one who served with us for 15 years, 84 to 99. In those years, she was Ginny Long. In 99, she and Justice Vernero went on the court in September of 1999, and she became Virginia Long. So that is the difference between the appellate division and the Supreme Court. There was recently a editorial in the Law Journal about our late colleague Marilyn Loftus and her contributions to the role of women in the courts. Well, Virginia Long did it also. She did it by example. She did it year in and year out and decision by decision. And I mention her in particular because she's my wife's hero, because Beverly always said to me, she always kept her priorities straight. She was there for every game, every dance recital, and yet still managed to do her job so well. I love the great Gibbons firm. I love the people there. But I miss my appellate division friends and colleagues and family. My secretary of 21 years, Estelle Kestenbaum, just physically couldn't be here today, but I understand Diane Agapito is, and I thank her for everything and for the other people, other secretaries, friends, and colleagues in Morristown. I note that even Ron Graves was able to take an hour off. The hardest working man that I know. My clerks are, as said before, part of my family. They have contributed to me, to my thinking, to my education, to learning what is going on as they come out of school. I thank everyone in the clerk's office, the staff attorneys, the case managers, the workers. If there is any legacy I want to be remembered by, it is the appointment on recommendation of the appointment committee of Mary Kate, Judge Cuff, Judge Perillo, and myself, of the appointment of Joe Orlando. He is terrific. That office is terrific. I thank him. I thank Jahaira Rodriguez, Carol Fralin, and Susan McLaughlin for this wonderful day. And it's a wonderful day for my family and myself. To my family, to Liza you've met, I thank her. To my mother-in-law who is here, who with her late husband made it possible for me to stay in government and for my children to have an education. To my wonderful sons, Scott, Mark, and Paul, my daughter-in-law, Lauren, who is with our 1-month-old. Oh, you are? With our 2-year-old. Our 1-month-old was our 2-year-old's birthday present. I love them. I thank them for everything. Today, on the way down, my family stopped at the cemetery, because at my retirement dinner, I neglected to mention the role of my parents. My father is probably most responsible for my being a lawyer. I quit law school 6 times in my first semester. I couldn't take it. And each time when I called him or thought about calling him, I was motivated to go back to school because he really thought I would enjoy it. He turned out to be right. And of course, what can I say about my dearest friend, my love of 41 years? I won't talk about the year before we got married. Of 42 years, Beverly, who has done so much for me and put up with so much. And Chief, let me say that without studying law or the New Jersey Constitution, she certainly has learned how to give a directive. I regret that I won't be around for the implementation of e-filing, of a meaningful appellate process for termination of parental rights cases, hopefully for compatible systems. Life goes on. I believe 70 is too young for mandatory retirement, but it's time for fresh blood, for new young people to look at things periodically. So I will not be around physically, but I'm going to be committed. I'm going to remain committed from where I am to continue to work for sentencing reform, to provide against undue sentence disparity, for the rights of indigents in civil cases to appeal, for full funding of legal services, and at the same time, expanding the services of other pro bono organizations. And I just thank you for everything. I have been very active in the Council of Chief Judges of State Courts of Appeals. I've been involved in a number of committees. And Chief, the reputation of this court is outstanding because its system, the New Jersey system, the New Jersey Appellate Division, deserve that through the judges who have sat here, the chiefs that have appointed them. And I'm very happy to announce what most people do not know. The Council of Chief Judges of State Courts of Appeal will be holding their 2015 annual meeting in Newark, New Jersey, which will bring the 93 chief judges of intermediate appellate courts here. That includes states like Texas with 14 districts and California with 6 and the like. So let me close by thanking you sincerely and honestly for everything. And in my capacity as former presiding judge for administration, I close as a spokesman for the appellate division for the last time and say to the Supreme Court to please remember always the most important word in the English language, affirmed. Thank you.
That's exactly an hour.